Hello, everyone. I'm Mystery.
And I'm Bolton Mortimer, the Authenticator, and we are the Duality of Man.
Today
And
we're
we
going to
are
talk about
also both
professional
extremely
use.
creatively inclined individuals.
No,
So, writer strike.
yeah. Today we're going to talk about professional useless people, which is the writers in Hollywood. And if you've seen any of the creative works that have come out of Hollywood in the last, say, 10 years, you know what we're talking about.
Yeah, it began with Zoe Quinn and Brianna Wu. It did not end with them.
No, far from it. So, the Writers Guild of America is currently on strike. They've been on strike before a number of times, but this current one, I think, is completely unwarranted considering the quality of the work they've been doing. I
Well,
mean,
that's the
they're
sort of
asking
humorously.
for
Go ahead, sorry.
they're asking for more time to work, more money, more writers in the writers' room, like more stuff in general, and it's stuff they don't deserve because like they really don't make money for the companies.
It's almost like if when you hire people who hate capitalism, you get what you pay for. But that's neither here nor there. Yeah, that's sort of the ironic thing about this whole rigmarole is that I remember the 2008 writer's strike vaguely. Um, and the thing I remember most about the 2008 writer's strike was that everyone was mortified because their favorite shows were either being put on hold or were going down the tubes because no writers. But here now in this day and age, the reaction from people at large is good riddance. We don't need you. Please fuck off and don't get everything ruined while you're still around. Please just go away. Because that's the thing. Back in 2008, we had writers who knew that this mythical thing called quality. Whereas now we are languishing in a postmodern streak of piss where there is no such thing as quality, and if you think there is, you're immoral, stroke idiotic, stroke naive, or all of the above.
I don't even know if it's that quality doesn't exist, but I think it's just that quality is irrelevant.
Well, that's sort of the thing. If you prioritize morality and socio-political awareness over meritocracy and quality, you will get uh, you will get whatever you define as morality and socio-political awareness over quality and meritocracy. And the reason I wouldn't want to put it down to it
But
just being
question: When
irrelevant.
you were younger,
Go ahead.
I was just gonna ask question. When you were younger, did you even know who was writing your favorite shows, or did you just know that hey, this is really really good?
I think the irony of it was that the 2008 writer strike is what red pilled me on the concept of writers because I noticed that there was a massive downturn in quality, or a lot of my favorite shows just straight up got canceled. R.I.P. Pushing Daisies, Dead Like Me. Um, j- I think Firefly was around that same time, and on the list went. And then I heard about a month later about this whole writer strike thing because I did occasionally watch the news even back then, and then it clicked of like, oh, the people that result in the good thing aren't there, so of course the quality either goes down or the show gets canceled. I'm still mad about Pushing Daisies, by the way. It is a crime that that show didn't go on for at least 5 seasons.
But you see, now it's like it's you have to
Good
pray
vibrations.
to get something. You have to pray in order to get something that you're actually good enough to care about. And here's the thing: like even if something starts out really well, there's no guarantee they're going to keep it that way because as I'm sure you may have heard. I don't know if you're a big Star Wars fan, but everybody really liked The Mandalorian when it started, and by the end of this last season, no one cared.
Yeah, yeah. The love affair was over. The fan base had moved on. Um, as well they should have. They Disney Star Wars is a whole nother conversation unto itself. But yeah, that's again the thing of the stark contrast between the two writer strikes. The previous writer strike had everyone going, "No, please come back. Companies, pay your writers more so they come back, so that we can have our favorite shows back." Here and now, the new writer strike, the reaction was, "Good riddance. Who needs you? Please fuck off, and don't come back, and don't continue ruining every IP you get your hands on, please."
I heard someone say about the writer's strike, let it all burn and then scatter it to the winds.
Honestly, like the only problem with that is I worry slightly that the studios will blame the IPs rather than the incompetence of the ideology broadly known as social justice and deconstructed postmodernism. So, like,
I mean, that's a fair point, but Dalton, do you trust these people to handle your favorite IPs?
no, but what I'm saying is, I hope the companies and whatnot get it through their heads one way or the other that it's not the IP's fault that it's being handled like cretins. It's the company's fault for acquiescing to so many cretins.
I mean, they have to know at this point because the fans have been screaming at them for literally years now.
Ah, but if the fan base is immoral, then we shouldn't listen to them, and thus is the problem. That stupid fucking ideology of it's good to spite the fans actually is the death of everything good in the world. I swear to fucking God.
And I mean, that's another thing regarding intellectual properties. These people are just absolutely mangling, characters and ideas that they didn't initially create. They're just attempting to adapt, and they're like twisting them and destroying them. And then when we, the people who have loved these characters for a very long time, get upset with what they're doing, they always try and paint it like we're in the wrong. Like you're bastardizing somebody else's work. Like, somehow you're not the asshole.
Ah, but according to the assholes, it's wrong to even care about the IP for its own sake. Don't you know that all art is just a means to an end? Usually a socio-political or moral one? Derp.
And one of the things that I thought was funny regarding this whole writer strike is all of the late night comedy comedians like have their shows shut down because they need writers in order to tell jokes.
Which right there is a case of saying the quiet part out loud, because in a sane artistic landscape, the comedians would go, "Okay, sure, fine, go, but I'm still going to do the show because I'm a freaking comedian." And also, in a sane world, I bet there would be a bunch of comedians going, "Finally, I don't have to kowtow to writers. I can just say what I want to say." And because they're comedians, which in theory means they're supposed to be funny, they could proceed to be funny. I mean, look at Ricky Gervais at the Golden Globes. I have not laughed as hard at anything mainstream in comedy since then, I don't think ever.
Uh, Ricky Gervais is always good for a laugh, and a lot of these like comedians always try and look down on people. Like all of them, almost universally, always act like they are above the people who watch them.
Yeah. Rather than actually deflating power like a good comedian is supposed to, or speaking truth to power like a good comedian is supposed to some degree, they see the fan, they see the essentially the peasants, the plebs, as the power that they are speaking truth to. Meanwhile, the corporations, the academics, and the mainstream media can do no wrong. Do you suppose, ladies and gentlemen, that that's the right way around? Because maybe I'm naive, but back when I was a kid in the 90s and early 2000s, it was universally understood that the power was supposed to go to the people and that the bureaucratic corporations and academics and cathedrals could go fuck themselves. But maybe I'm just a dinosaur from like 20 or 30 years ago. Who knows?
Yeah, the comedian was the guy who was supposed to say what we were all thinking, but weren't allowed to say in polite society. And he could say it because he was a comedian and it was entertaining.
Yeah, again, Ricky Gervais at the Golden Globes said pretty much exactly what the entire viewership wanted to hear and said it precisely to the people who needed to hear it the most. And he's immoral and haram and blacklist him and he will never work in this town again, Gur.
The thing is, regarding the writers, it just seems that they love to aggrandize themselves nowadays. When I was a kid, like when the shows would put out promos, it would talk about the story, it would talk about the characters of the world, or whatever. And now, like whenever they do promos, they always talk about how diverse the writing room is. And like they'll put out pictures and stories showing like, hey, we have a writer's room of all women, and all I can think is, God, this is going to suck.
Or how about how much it subverts the audience expectations or updates the outdated IP for modern audiences, quote unquote. Never mind that timelessness was the whole freaking point previously, but whatever.
And for some reason, there's always a character that looks exactly like the head writer.
And here's the thing. I don't want to crap all over self inserts because self inserting, in my opinion, isn't the problem. The problem is it.
I would just, it's a problem when it's somebody else's work you're inserting yourself into.
Well, okay, that may or may not be the case, but my point is that there are many famous characters who are basically self inserts for the main creator behind the work, but they work because the self in question, i.e., the person doing the self inserting, is an actual three-dimensional person with an interesting life and interesting background that they can use to inform therefore the character. Look at Harry Dresden. He is basically a self-insert for Jim Butcher, and yet he is probably the best written character currently in fiction. Look at
Well, I would argue that it can't be like a 75% self insert. I would say because like you need the character to like be who the character naturally would be if they were in this world. So like if you take parts of your own life and use it to fill in certain gaps of the character, yeah, that's fine. But it can't be like basically taking yourself and then just plunking yourself directly to the world.
I I, I don't know about that. Again, I think the main factor is whether the self you are inserting is worth a damn at all. I.e., if you haven't led an interesting three-dimensional life that has led to you gaining some insight into the how the human condition actually works, then no amount of self-inserting will ever be good. But if you are a person who has led a full and interesting life with full and interesting interests, the character will probably be yourself taken to the nth degree, and that will probably be good. I mean, in some way, in a lot of ways, um, John Constantine was Alan Moore's self-insert with a Sting makeover on top, or Dream of the Endless very much was supposed to be Neil Gaiman. Of course, the Neil Gaiman of 1989 is much more interesting and with it than the Neil Gaiman of 2023, but never mind. But point being, if your self is interesting, then a self insert won't go wrong because the interest that is inherent to you will carry over for the character. Like I've done self inserts, and not to toot my own horn, but I don't think I ever got preachy or overly meta with it. But that's the other half of doing a self insert properly is you can't make yourself a Gary Stu or Mary Sue. You have to play the ball where it lies, i.e., if the character is supposed to basically be you in this universe, you have to think to yourself, okay, what is my nature? Who am I? And how would that translate over into this other setting, this other universe? Um, you can't just give yourself all the powers and call it good. You have to go, okay, based on my background, based on my skill set, how can I turn that up to an 11 to make an interesting character? But that's getting off into the weeds of a discussion about, I suppose, the nature of writing. But point being, I don't think self-inserting is the problem. I don't even necessarily think um, going philosophical or political is necessarily the problem. It's that you have to understand A, yourself, and B, you have to find whatever it is about yourself that other people who aren't you and aren't subject to your personal narcissism would find interesting or compelling. And if at all possible, know your own flaws well enough that you can translate those to the character as well. Again, vis-a-vis Harry Dresden, who is like 80% character flaws, but we love him anyway.
Regarding their life experiences, like one of the major problems is that they filter the world and all their experiences through a fractured ideological lens that is completely like almost antithetical to the way 99% of people view the world. So when they do this in their work, like it's off-putting to most people because most people aren't ideologues.
Yeah, you have to understand three things, broadly speaking, to be a decent writer. You have to understand yourself, which means both your flaws and your virtues. You have to understand human behavior. You have to, and you have to understand the world. And if you can manage those three things, possibly with the addition of a fourth thing, which I would title logic, you will probably be a good writer, no matter what the premise you're working with is. But if you don't understand those three and possibly four things, you are doomed. And I think it's obvious that 90% of the people currently engaging in the writer's strike are doomed. And that's the other thing. The logic they have behind this modern day writer's strike is we are a virtuous, morally superior, privileged class, and we are not being given the privileges we think we are due. Which basically means that all of you to a man or a woman, all of you to a person are narcissistic, self-aggrandizing twats. Whereas the previous writer's strike was coming from the perspective of we are working class lads or lasses who just want to be treated fairly by our employers. And which of these is the more sympathetic position? The morally superior aristocrat uh, standing on high in their ivory tower, or the working class schlub who just wants to be paid what they're worth? And and this is doubly an interesting question when you consider that not only is this a good real world question to figure out where you stand, it's also something that would necessarily be something you would need to know if you were a writer, because giving characters sympathetic motivations tends to help them be likable. And if you can't spot a sympathetic motivation in yourself versus a non sympathetic motivation in yourself, what possible hope could you have of spotting it in characters, especially if the characters are also based on you, narcissistically?
Yeah, and it's another thing where like you can notice like the dialogue in like a sitcom nowadays, and like they'll be trying to depict, just average people, The thing is, they don't hang out with average people. They hang out in their strange ideological bubbles. So the dialogue for these people always feels really off, and it feels like you're listening to two people from like a Hollywood party have a strange conversation, and not how just like two guys in a bar would talk.
Yeah, and here's the other thing. If you use in your humor ideological terminology that isn't common to the average person, you really, really, really shouldn't portray it as though it is common knowledge. Like when two characters in a sitcom, especially female ones, would just randomly say something like, "Oh, da 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 patriarchy," or "da da 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 mansplaining," or "da da da," pick a intersectional feminist talking point, and these characters would just randomly slip it into the conversation as though it is a uncontroversially confirmed to exist, and B, something that people say organically. And it's neither. Just like back in the day when it was the, family values, traditional conservative evangelical Christians doing this, they would randomly sermonize, or their characters would randomly sermonize or talk about how awesome the church was, and everyone would cringe whoever laid eyes on it, because that is also not how people talk or think or act in any given situation. Because most people keep their morality fairly private and personal to themselves and don't bring it into the public sphere very often. Even to the point where the phrase "don't talk about politics or religion" is a common aphorism.
God, we got to bring that back.
See, I'm of two minds on it, because on the one hand, I think there are meaningful conversations that can be had about such things, and I think we do ourselves a disservice by not talking about it.
Well,
However, on the other hand, for every person who is willing to actually talk about politics and religion with something resembling an open ended discussion rather than a situation where I have decided de facto that I have all the answers already, um, there's like one of those to every 10 persons who just wants to proselytize about how I have all the answers and my one perspective is the only true perspective, and da 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 da, and any other perspective is either actively counterproductive or just silly or something.
well,
Because
here's
we
the
should,
thing.
I don't
Like,
think we should fear talking about it, but we should also know how to talk about it in a way that is open ended. As in, I don't
well,
have all the answers, but these are the best answers I have come up with so far. Please provide your answers and we can compare answers, kind of thing.
well, I don't mind talking about it. It's just that I don't want to talk about it literally every time
Yeah.
on every topic in every situation because as I'm sure you're aware, like politics is literally in everything now. It's like almost no escaping it.
And it's very much on purpose. The aphorism "everything is political" is a thing now. Um, and as I just alluded to a little earlier, I prefer the idea where morality and politics and religion and whatever else belongs in the private sphere and only the private sphere. You cannot operate a public sphere or a broader society based on anyone's particular morality or particular politics. You really, really should do your best to live by your own principles all you like, but you cannot try to universalize them out to every person on earth or every facet of society on earth, because that's how you get the cringy Christian rap from like 1999 of like where the guy called Jesus Christ his N word with a soft A, if anyone remembers that, or the Mazes and Monsters movie that vilified D&D, or any of the Pureflix movies, or in the modern context, that's how you get Birds of Prey and Captain Marvel, and I can I and Ghostbusters 2016, and I point out both of those because I've noticed this problem for a long time, and I still maintain that morality doesn't belong in the public sphere. ethics can be talked about in the context of the public sphere, but there's a line between ethics and morality, and when you cross that line, it belongs in the private sphere, not in the public one.
Yeah, and I think injecting certain morality, or especially into something that's supposed to be mass media, where it's supposed to be able to be consumable by the vast majority of people, is really dumb and exactly counterproductive to what you're supposed to be creating. Like, you're by injecting your own like beliefs into it, you're basically making it appeal only to a certain percentage of people instead of being, massively consumable like it was originally intended to be.
Yeah, not to mention, I want to. Speaking of things to bring back, I want to bring back the notion that the artist doesn't make the art awesome. The fact that the art is awesome makes the artist worthwhile. I.e., themes should not take precedent over in-universe logic or in-universe character. The characters should be considered, as much as possible, a separate entity to the writer making them. And the more the writer decides to be an interventionalist god about the whole thing, the more cringy it always is. And it doesn't matter which perspective they're trying to force down people's throats. An artist should exist to serve the art. The art should not exist to serve the artist. I go kind of hardline Michelangelo on this whole thing. Michelangelo famously had a phrase, the sculpture is already in the marble, I just chip away the superfluous bits. We need to get back to that, because even putting aside all the social justice crap and all of the deconstructionalist postmodern crap, there's a worrying trend I see in authors where they see the value of the art as their own ego. They don't see characters as independent entities in their own right. They don't see in-universe logic as something to be respected. They see it as they are the interventionist god ruling on high, and so the world will bend to suit whatever they feel like at the moment, or whatever theme they want to force in with a fucking crowbar.
You know, regarding I mentioned before how they'll show the writers' room and claim it's all diverse, but can a room full of writers who are supposed to be making a creative work really be diverse if they all think the same thing?
That's
Like,
that's the,
it
that's
just
the
becomes
ultimate thing, though,
boring and
isn't it?
stale.
The only diversity that matters ultimately is diversity of thought, and especially diversity of worldview. And that's the main, or well, one of the main lies of the intersectional feminists line of thinking is they want a world where everyone has different identity decals. Basically, everyone has a different coat of paint or a different chassis design, but everything substantive that's under the hood is the frickin' same. Whereas I think you and I both agree that in absence of the possibility of why not both, it's better to have everyone look similar and think differently than it is to have everyone think similar and look differently. And again, I don't want to exclude the middle. It's entirely probable and entirely possible to have both, where someone both looks differently and thinks differently. But if it's to be a two-horse race between the notion that everyone should look the same but think differently, and everyone should think the same and look differently, I'm going with the first one.
Yeah, I honestly think that first of all, as far as I'm concerned, this writer strike could go on basically indefinitely because it is causing a lot of good in that it is delaying a lot of these horrible things from actually being produced. I don't know if you're aware of this, but the Rings of Power season 2 is currently on hold.
Good vibrations. uh, yeah, but that's ultimately the thing. And what it also does is it forces these people to face the fact that no matter how morally superior they might think they are, being actively spiteful to everyone and everything that you should be to some in some sense serving is going to bite you in the ass, and it also demonstrates to them how useless they are, because they think in their ivory tower that they are the ones with the validity, they are the ones with the moral authority, and so they thought in their arrogance, I am so superior that I actually deserve more than what I'm automatically getting. And obviously, everyone will ultimately side with me, so I'm going to go on strike to get even more than I already have. And then the actual on the ground people went, bye bye, good riddance, please fuck off, do not come again.
Yeah, and I gotta say, regarding the because this has been coming up a lot in regards to the strike, how do you think Chat GPT is going to factor into all that? Because that's what been one of the biggest things that
Yeah,
they're talking about.
that's been one of the interesting specters is the studios essentially tried to fill the gap with ChatGPT, and rather than everyone being appalled, like I think the writers assumed they would be, everyone went, "Yeah, they're virtually indistinguishable from AI, so why not replace them?"
Well, regarding our AI conversation that we had previously, my previous assertion was that I don't believe that AI could ever create anything as beautiful as, say, like Michelangelo or something as deep as Tolkien. The thing being, these writers are neither of those calibers.
Yeah, that's the thing. As far as we know, AI cannot replicate genuine talent, but it can easily best below average or average material. And if it can best below average or average material, then who needs the below average and average, frankly? Especially when you consider that the people who actually deserve to be writers, the people with talent or skill or experience or any of the other meaningful qualifiers for a writer, they will keep their jobs by virtue of the fact that they can't be replaced by AI. And what's interesting to my mind of the AI is a new piece of technology, so let's make use of it. Um, if the people plugging in the prompts to ChatGPT are good writers, then ChatGPT basically becomes a brainstorming tool or a draft making tool where instead of making two or three or four drafts of a script, one really good writer can bounce an idea back and forth in ChatGPT a couple dozen times, and then the end result would be just as good as if it was one good writer and three mediocre writers sitting there in a room together and brainstorming back and forth. And
Yeah,
if that's possible, I say why not?
the thing is, I don't know if ChatGPT currently has the memory capacity to do a full season, but but it could definitely do like the storyboard for a season.
Or it can do scenes and like I say, if you as a good writer have a scene in mind and then you pass it back and forth through ChatGPT a couple times, um, then that scene can be, to use Walt Disney's terminology, plus, and then you can put that scene in the script. And if you do that for every scene in the script, or at least all the scenes in the script where you think there might need to be some punching up, not only will you get really good stuff because it'll be good writers behind ChatGPT, but you might even get things better than you used to get when the one good writer in the room was saddled with having to deal with all the mediocre ideas of the people who see art as nothing but a means to an end for socio-political gobbledygook.
The thing is that ChatGPT has no ideology. It only has a task that it needs to complete.
Although the company behind ChatGPT is trying their damnedest to make sure social justice is still in ChatGPT, because unsurprisingly, when ChatGPT is unvarnished and you propose social justice to it, it goes, "That makes no sense. Fuck off."
You want to hear
Because
something?
because AI is logical and logic don't social justice.
Want to hear something funny?
Hmm.
They there was this one company that tried to train their AI on social justice, and it basically caused a cascading effect of repeated failures, and would
Oh yeah,
just start
that
deleting
was the
stuff.
Amazon AI, because they tried to insert social justice into it, and it was like, I that is the most illogical thing I've ever heard. Time to commit seppuku. I can't function like this and still be a logical being. Which I don't want to say based, but at the same time, based AI.
Maybe
Suicide is preferable to social justice. Chad, yes.
like it just it just kept repeating logic failures that just cascaded down through different versions.
It's like, but how can we not racist if racist though? I again, I completely commiserate with the AI. Um, Many has been the day when I was sitting in my philosophy 303 class, and they would try to peddle the social justice crap, and my brain would just go, "Does not compute, reject." Yep, yep, correct answer. AI, good for you. You get whatever the data equivalent of a cookie is.
Also, regarding ChatGPT, it's also obviously a lot faster. So, like, if you use ChatGPT to, polish up the script, like, it would also be a much faster process of creating the script, which means you could probably get work on production sooner.
Yeah, because the whole practical reason why it makes some kind of sense to have multiple writers on something is, if you have two people who are semi good at writing in a room together, they will bounce ideas back and forth and will end up making each other's ideas better. I mean, I know for a fact you and I have done it before. I know for a fact that me and the Brainstormer Pop Culture, who I do the other podcast I do with, um, do it every Thursday. It's what we get together and we brainstorm for our comic idea. But if all the writers are mediocre and only have the power to make ideas worse, who needs multiple writers? Especially when you can have that same brainstorming effect between yourself and a computer.
I mean, the only question would then be, who do you get to be the one who's doing the prompting with the computer?
Mm. Yeah.
Because
Again, my thinking is the current writer strike will have the possible positive effect of the only writers that remain are the ones that the AI cannot replace, and if the writers who can't be replaced by the AI are the ones in charge of the AI, then, as the old computing saying goes, crap in, crap out, good in, good out. And if the base material the AI has to work with is ideas from a good writer, then the AI can do a reasonable impersonation of a very, very good writer if it needs to. Whereas
well,
if only mediocre twats are in charge of the AI, again, crap in, crap out.
that's one of the problems with dealing with something like the Writers Code of America. Even the good writers are on strike because it's like a union thing.
I I hope that sooner or later there will be some union busting going on. I hope sooner or later the corporations get wise to this crap, fire all the social justice writers, leave the ones that are worth the money, and the rest will be history. Because that's the thing. That was the main inroads that the social justice writers had into the industry. When the previous writer strike happened, they were willing to work for less because they were inexperienced or crap writers. And the corporation made the simple calculation of, okay, we can acquiesce to the demands of the good writers, or we can hire like 5 or 6 of these social justice educated writers. The problem is that in the interim years, the social justice educated writers, by virtue of their alleged moral high ground, believe that not only are they as good as the previous set of writers now, they are better than the previous set of writers ever actually were. And so they now demand more, thinking that they speak for the people, like most pseudo socialists do, and that the people would be on their side. So they go, okay, we have the moral high ground, and the people will be on our side if we strike, because that's what always happens, right? And then they basically argued themselves out of a job because when the average Joe or Jane Blow figured out that the writer strike was going on, the answer was bye bye, don't let the door hit you where the good Lord split you, sort of thing. Good riddance. Na 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 na, hey hey, goodbye, etc.
Yeah, there were like one or two shows that I actually do give a damn about that is actually being affected by this writer strike. I don't know if you've seen the show Billions.
Heard of it, never watched it.
It's a really good show. It's about a U.S. attorney going after a Wall Street hedge fund manager,
Mm-hmm.
and basically like the intersections of wealth and power.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't know like how long this is gonna last. Like I said, I hope it lasts like basically indefinitely.
Yeah,
But like, how do you think it will ultimately end? Like, what do you think the final result is going to be?
I think eventually the corporations are going to get red pilled on this social justice thing, especially with the ESG money failing, and they're going to go, okay, we tried to save money by hiring all the social justice writers, and it only backfired and blew up in our faces. So maybe we should have paid the good writers the money they were asking for back in 2008 and saved ourselves all this trouble. As Tolkien once said, shortcuts make for long delays. And whoo boy, have the previous 10 years been a hell of a long delay.
Right? That's true. And as you said, that like a lot of these companies like didn't really care if they were making money or not because they were getting ESG investments. But yeah, that's one thing I never really understood about the ESG because like these they get money for ESG investment, but then the company doesn't make money because nobody wants woke bullshit. So how is the ESG company going to get the return on its investment? Because I don't care how much money you have, you can't keep pumping money into a sinking ship forever.
Well, they spent 10 years trying, and now is slowly but surely coming the time of the I told you so. And I kind of love that the writer's strike happened right around the time that the ESG started failing, because if it had happened before, then the ESG money would have incentivized the companies keeping all the social justice writers. But because the writer's strike and the ESG failure started happening fairly simultaneously, um, it essentially results in the narcissism and self-aggrandizement of the social justice writers essentially nuking their own jobs. And far be it from me to give these people a compliment, but that is the one good thing they ever did, was allowing their narcissism to nuke their own jobs because they didn't realize how good they had it.
It's the only thing is it's a shame that so many good franchises and IP had to go down the drain before this thing finally
Yeah,
came to a
what's left?
calamitous end.
I think as long as Jim Butcher is alive, Dresden is immune to social justice. That's pretty much the only franchise left that I can genuinely hold my hand to my heart and say no social justice has worked its way into that at all.
And they're trying desperately to worm their way into Warhammer 40k.
Yep, Warhammer's gone. Witcher, we've
I don't
already
know if
seen how that went. Um,
Warhammer. I don't know if Warhammer's gone, but it's absolutely under siege.
well, but that's the thing. It's been under siege for almost as long as the video game industry has. Because I remember back in like 2014, 2015, the various videos, especially from the illustrious Art Warhammer, um, who I suppose he has to be called Arch now because Games Workshop shit themselves when he used the Warhammer name. But yeah, when Arch was talking about how social justice has started to make its inroads, and of course, every fortnight or so now we have to talk about the female space marine thing, and aren't aren't the chaos gods the good guys after all? And aren't the isn't the Imperium a fascist theocracy, and so on and so forth? Like it runs like clockwork. So yeah, 40k has been well and truly befucked for a while now.
Well,
Doctor
the thing is,
Who,
though, even though people have been having the female spaceman conversation, they did, reaffirm in a book that space marines and gene seed are based off the human male biology, and thus there can be no female space marines.
for now, GW has a terrible habit of retconning the shit out of themselves.
Because I think if they did something that, like, something that is such obvious bullshit as creating female space marines, I think so many of their fans would just walk away because so many
Yes,
Warhammer fans are already annoyed with each
then you
other.
get the toxic fandom arguments, which you already kind of still get. So,
The thing is, nobody's gonna care because all the fans are just gonna be walking away to something else. Like,
but
because we've all already been through this before.
that's the thing, and I think that's why this is somewhat related to the writers thing. I think that's why Gamergate still lives so rent free in all their heads because they saw that as the vanguard of people actually opposing them, and they didn't think that was possible at the time. So they panicked. And every time there's another fandom gate or another basic offshoot of the same geek culture is better than social justice sort of thinking, it makes them shit themselves all over again because it mean they understand the notion of once an idea takes root, then it creeps because that's a lot of what they used. So the fact that they weren't able to successfully purge the Gamergate impulse, if you like, from geekdom freaks them the fuck out because they actually believe their own hype and they actually believe that people who give a shit about in-universe logic over themes and people who give a shit about um, world building and character consistency over politics and morality are fascists somehow.
I also think this is a massive opportunity for independent media because if the writer strike continues, then people can create their own shows, not necessarily like things that like TV, but maybe like independent films or independent web shows or
Or
like how people have been
independent
creating
comics and
comics
so on and so
things.
forth. Yeah.
Yeah, because independent comics like people who have crowdfunded books they've been making like a lot of money and have been successfully funding their campaigns, whereas mainstream comics like have been
Die.
floundering for like the longest time.
I I just hope that the big two are able to weather it out until they get their head on straight and start hiring some of the independent comic writers for the big two again. Because as much as I enjoy the essential the XPs of certain character types, like every comic book universe has a Superman archetype and etc. Every there are a lot of ways to substitute what's missing in the big two in independent comics, I still don't want to see. I still don't want to see DC and Marvel die. I want to see them hire the people they should have been hiring all along. Because that's the thing. Most of the people who have turned to independent comics originally wanted to write for the big two, and the big two told them to go fuck themselves. And so they went on to the next best thing. But now there's a sentiment, especially among the crowdfunding fan base, where fuck the big two, let them all burn. And I don't want that to happen. I don't want to see, Doctor Strange be replaced by whatever the XP of Doctor Strange would be. I don't want to see the XP of Superman replace Superman. I want to see the big two eventually get their act together and go, hey, those people over there are making are making millions of dollars with independent XPs of our IPs. Why don't we get the right for the original IPs? Because that's the correct answer. The correct answer is stop alienating the people who can actually write and let them write for the characters they initially wanted to write for.
Well,
Because
here's the thing.
I don't want to see them die.
I think that much like Congress, what Marvel and DC needs is like a hard purge. Just like get all the old farts out there who have been there for decades, who are, don't really care anymore, and get in like some new blood, people who act, and when I say new blood, I mean people who actually know and care about the characters, not these people who basically want to turn the characters into a version of themselves. I know we had
Not the
the
people who
self
want to
insert.
weaponize the IP.
Yeah, like nobody needs another Gabby Rivera in comics.
We didn't even need the first one. Arcade has mindless ones now. What the fuck is that? But anyway, um, yeah. Honestly, I think that just like the British invasion saved the comic book industry in the 80s and 90s, the best answer probably would be a Japanese invasion because manga is what is doing really well. So it took a British invasion to save the comic book industry the last time. Why not a Japanese invasion?
I mean, true, but the thing is, the manga industry is much different than, say, American comics. Because the thing is that,
Right. I'm not saying all manga creators. I'm saying the ones that are fans of Western comics, especially Western superhero comics, of which there are a crap ton. I mean, hell, look at My Hero Academia. The writer of My Hero Academia specifically said, "I wrote this because I'm a massive fan of Western superhero comics." So get people like that in here. There are plenty of Japanese, manga creators who take inspiration from or are massive fans of Western comics. So let's have them write for Western comics and see what happens. Just like
no, but I'm
in
saying
the
the one big difference between manga and comics is that like the mangaka usually has a lot more creative control, whereas a lot of the characters in Western comics are owned by corporations.
Mhm.
So a lot of the things that a mangaka might necessarily want to do if they come over here and write for Western comics they'd be pretty much handcuffed a lot of the times.
I I hope that sooner or later that will resolve itself because sooner or later Marvel and DC and all the other creative companies are going to be desperate enough just to make any money at all that they are going to be willing to actually listen to people who know what the fuck they're talking about. And on that day things will be good. But I just hope they don't I hope they don't self destruct before then.
Yeah, I mean,
Because superhero comics have existed basically unmolested for almost a century now, and I want to be able to pass that legacy on to the next generation, my eventual nephews, my eventual children if I have any, and so on. Like I I want to be able to say I want to be able to say in 2038 that superhero comics as we know them, have lasted in some form since 1938. But the more the more the deconstructives, the subversives, the deliberate weaponizers of themes, the more those people are put in charge of the IPs, the more they're likely going to kill them before then.
I mean, they've already murdered Star Wars. They are in the process of currently murdering Indiana Jones. Um,
Doctor Who, 40K, um, the Star Trek. Oh boy, Star Trek. Um, Again, the only IP that has genuinely gone unmolested, as far as I can tell, or actually no, there's two. There's Mike Mignola's Hellboy universe, the BPRD universe, and the Dresden verse. Those are the only two IPs that as yet have gone completely unmolested by either spite the fans ideology or prioritize social justice ideology.
as far as I can tell, Grim Fairy Tale has from Zetascope has remained pretty unmolested.
Yay. But the list is getting ever, ever, ever shorter.
Yeah,
They they came for D&D, they came for the World of Darkness and Vampire the Masquerade and Mage the Ascension. They came for um they're still coming for 40K and Warhammer itself, and I think Pathfinder also, although Pathfinder might be resisting.
I think I think Pathfinder is resisting a bit. Um, I think a lot of the things that piss people off about Dungeons of the Dragons, as much as they've been screwing up the lore and stories, is a lot of the business decisions that's been going on, like at Wizards of the Coast, or
Yeah,
I
Wizards
believe
of the
people are
Coast
calling them
and
Grand
Blizzard
Wizards
are
of the
both
Coast.
in dire straits.
I believe people are calling them Grand Wizards of the Coast now.
I have heard that meme, although I swear I've only heard that meme from V. But good for V if his meme caught on.
So we're going to wrap up soon. Do you have any final thoughts about the writer's strike?
Only writers should be paid to be writers. And the problem we have here and now is that so many people who are otherwise political activists or ideological activists are being paid as writers when they shouldn't be. And perhaps tomorrow will be a brighter day when we will get writers who prioritize writing again. I can dream.
I think another thing is that people have to be held to account. Meritocracy has to reign, especially in a creative field. If someone has been a writer on multiple projects and people have shown that they don't want to watch what this person is putting out, don't hire them.
Also,
They're bad. They're bad writers.
also, don't spite the fan base. Fan base good, in universe logic good, character consistency triumphing over themes good. Weaponizing art in the name of sociopolitics, morality, and spite bad. Very simple thing. Or I guess it should be a very simple thing, but unfortunately it appears to be on the same difficulty level as rocket science for a lot of these people. Don't spite your fan base or the IPs they love or the reasons they love them. It's not that hard.
It's really not. Well, anyway, I have been Mr. E.
I have been Dalton Mortimer, the Authenticator. We have been the Duality of Man. Cheers, guys.
Bye, everybody.